ॐ श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादशङ्करं लोकशङ्करम् अज्ञानाञ्जह्नवीतीर्थं विद्यातीर्थं विवेकिनां सर्वेषां सुखदं तीर्थं भारतीतीर्थमाश्रये विद्याविनयसम्पन्नं वीतरागं विवेकिनं वन्दे वेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञं विधुशेखरभारतीम्. Dear friends, welcome to the 16th session of PRABODHA SUDHAKARA discussions. So we have been studying the 5th chapter of this text, which is titled as Mano Nigraha Prakaranam. This particular chapter is a very important chapter in the sense that it gives us a lot of practical insights which can be made part of our sadhana in the process of attaining vairagyam. As we have seen before, vairagyam is one of the fourfold qualifications of sadhana chatushtaya sampattihi, which is required for pursuing the jnana marga towards atma jnanam and moksha. So vairagyam is dispassion towards sense objects, dispassion towards the body mind, which is very essential in the process of gaining a peaceful and restful mind, which is a disciplined mind, which is available for inquiry into the nature of the self, into the nature of the Atman. So keeping that in mind, let us continue our study of this chapter. We have seen a few verses of this chapter in our previous meetings. We will continue from where we left. So verse number 75. Advara tunga kudye grihe varuddho yatha vyagraha bahunirgama prayatnaish shrantas tisthati patan swashanscha tatha. So in this verse, Bhagavad is providing to us another one of his analogies. So here the mind is akin to a Vyagra. Vyagra means tiger. Vyagraha means tiger. So it's a tiger. So here in this scenario, the tiger he is explaining to us what is the state of a tiger which is caught up, which is locked up within a home or within a place surrounded by high compound walls in such a way that it is not able to escape anymore. It is trying to escape, but it finds that it is not able to escape. When it finds out that it is not able to escape, what happens to it? After making all the attempts, after struggling for a long time, it finally settles down at some place and sort of goes into a restful state, due to its understanding that there is no possibility of escape anymore from this place for me. In the next verse, Bhagavad is going to tell us, connect us to the meaning of this analogy, the implication of this analogy within the topic of our discussion. So this particular verse, let us understand the running meaning. Advara tunga kudye grihe varuddho yatha vyagraha. So advara tunga kudye grihe avaruddhaha. Vyagraha avaruddhaha means what? The vyagraha is, the tiger is enclosed or caught within a certain space, a certain home, which is covered with advara tunga kudye, so which is not having any openings through which it can escape, and also it is having high walls, so that it cannot just jump out and then run away. So when it is caught within such a home, avaruddhaha, when it is locked up within such a home, what happens to it? Bahunirgama prayatnaihi shrantaha. So it becomes tired after making several attempts to escape. Bahunirgama prayatnaihi shrantaha. It becomes tired. Tishtati patan swashanscha tatha. So after becoming tired because of the failure of all attempts to escape from that place, it goes and sits down in some place, takes rest in some place with great deep breaths, because it's been struggling for a long time, you see. So patan swashanstha tatha. So it falls down, it crumples down into one place, and it is giving heavy breaths because it has been struggling for a long time, and now it finds itself unable to move around. So with that analogy in mind, let us now read the next verse. सर्वेन्द्रियावरोधात् उद्योगशतैर् अनिर्गमं वीक्ष्य शान्तं तिष्ठति चेतः निरुद्यमत्वं तदा याति. So the mind also. So Bhagavad Padal is giving to us a technique here, a method here, in order to restrain the mind from moving out to grabbing sense objects. In the previous verses we have seen the mind actually keeps roaming about, right? It is like a, you can say it is like a some kind of a what we may call as a carrier, or what we may call as a certain dependent entity which is dependent upon the sense objects for its survival, or sense objects for its pleasure seeking behavior, to satisfy its pleasure seeking behavior. So the mind is always like that. It keeps jumping from one sense object to another sense object to another sense object. So it is always in that searching mode or enjoying mode. So it wants to either search or enjoy, search or enjoy, search or enjoy, right? It is if it is enjoying, then for some time that enjoyment continues, then again it goes back into what is the next thing I can enjoy, what is the next thing, like that. So such a mind, in order to quell such a mind, what is it that we have to do? So restrain the sense organs from moving towards the sense objects. So the main idea here is the idea of this Dhamma. So one of the fourfold qualifications is the sixfold disciplines, the Shama, Dhamma, Uparatihi, Titiksha, Shraddha, Samadhanam. So in that, Shama and Dhamma refer to the mind, mastery over the mind, control of the mind and control over the sense organs. So in order to restrain the mind from moving about to grabbing sense objects, you have to first restrain the sense organs. So when you restrain the sense organs, then the mind, even though it tries to go out, you are not giving it the opportunity to go out and grab the sense objects, and therefore it accepts the inevitability of the fact that this person whose mind I am is not enabling me to go out and grab sense objects. So I would rather give up desires and sit quietly in some corner. So such a mind is what we try to acquire. And again, we should also remember this restraint of the sense objects is not via forceful restraint. So it is not via running away from the sense objects. It is not via forcefully treating the sense objects and throwing them away or anything like that, but it is via the vichara. It is via the understanding of the defects of the sense objects, the defects which are carried by the Vishayas, which has been discussed in the previous chapter itself. So Vishaya Nigraha Prakaranam was the previous chapter in which the defects of the Vishayas, the defects of the sense objects was elaborately discussed. One can refer to them and gather that understanding through the meditation upon the defects, through the keen understanding of the defects of the sense objects. One gives up the desires, one gives up the one can attain the restraint of the sense organs, and by restraining the sense organs one attains the peace of mind. So this is the idea. Now recollecting the previous analogy about the inability of the tiger to escape and therefore attaining a resting place, now here the idea is the mind also attains such a resting place when it finds out that you have built walls of sense control around the mind, which prevent the mind to escape from oneself, to go outside, to go without the opposite of within, and grab the sense object. So when you have restrained the mind, it has no option but to settle down in one place calmly and remain peaceful without disturbing you. This is the idea. Sarvendriya avarodhat udyoga shataihi anirgamam vikshya. So when you have restrained the indriyas, sarvendriya avarodhat, so when by the restraint of the indriyas, udyoga shataihi anirgamam vikshya, because when it recognizes that udyoga shataihi, by hundreds of effort, by countless efforts, anirgamam vikshya, so it is not able to move out, it is not able to grasp the sense objects, it is not able to attain pleasure from the sense objects, because we have restrained the sense organs. So the mind can move out only via the sense organs, but the sense organs have been restrained, so there is no possibility of moving out. By observing this restful state, niruddhyamatvam tadayati. So once it attains a restful state, it also attains the sense of peace, or the sense of, or the lack of desire in putting effort. Niruddhyamatvam means what? It is the lack of desire to put any further effort. So such a lack of desire is therefore the cause for the peace itself. So when mind is peaceful means what? The mind is not having a desire to get up and go around once again. In that state, we have to keep the mind that such a mind is available to us for further vichara into the nature of the self, Brahma vichara, Atma vichara, like that. Okay, so with that understanding, let us go into the next one. So like this verse, many such messages have been given to us in this chapter, very important messages, which we will see in the end of this chapter as a short summary. So here, this beautiful verse here is the last verse of this chapter, in which Bhagavad Padal is summarizing 4 disciplines or 4 practices, 4 techniques, 4 devices, sadhana, to avail the possibility of calming the mind, resting the mind as much as possible. So what are the 4? Let us read. Prana spandana nirodhat satsangat vasanatyagat haricharana bhakti yogan manasvavegam jahati shanaihi. So 4 of them are listed here. Prana spanda nirodhat. Second one, satsangat. Third one, vasanatyagat. Fourth one, haricharana bhakti yogat. As a result of all of this, what happens? Manaha swavegam jahati shanaihi. Swavegam means there is a sense of disturbance in the mind always, in order to attain happiness via sensory enjoyments. This disturbance which is there in the mind, that swavegam, it will give up. The mind itself will give up slowly. Shanaihi. Just because you do the sadhana one day, it is not going to happen. A few days or a few months, it may not happen. But practice them for a few years, practice them for a few decades, then you will definitely see the result. As long as you don't see the result, you keep practicing. It may even take a few janmas, but what is there? Right? In the pursuit of, we have already taken so many countless of janma in which we have suffered, incredibly, and we have endured lots of sufferings. All the tapatraya we have endured. If you don't struggle now, then you will have to endure them for countless more janmas. So it is better to please struggle for a few janmas, do sadhana for a few janma, and give up these things altogether at once. Okay, so now what is the sadhana? Prana spanda nirodhat. So the first technique, the first device which Bhagavad Padal is suggesting is Prana spanda nirodha. This This mind is intimately connected to the breath, the prana, the breath. And as we all know, the pranayama is one of the practice which is inbuilt into our routine sadhana. Those of us who are doing Sandhya Vandanam are well aware that this pranayama is part of the Sandhya Vandanam procedure, precisely because it calms the mind, it makes the mind available for thinking about higher ideals in life, for doing japa, for meditating on Bhagavan, like that. So the mind has to be available. Right? The mind, an available mind is nothing but a calm and peaceful mind which is not interested in worldly affairs, which is not interested in sensory objects. So in order to calm the mind, one process is use the breath. Because the breath and the mind are intimately connected, calming the breath will help you to calm the mind. So prana spanda means the disturbance which is there in the breath. If you calm it down, if you are able to hold your breath, if you are able to calm it down, take slow, deep breaths for longer and longer time, then as per the Shastra, as per the Yoga Shastra which is provided to us, if you practice the control, mastery over the breath, then this becomes a very excellent aid in calming the mind also. So prana spanda nirodhat. Why is the prana connected, or how do we know the prana is connected to the mind? So this is a logic which is given to us by the scriptures. We might all have noticed, when the person is disturbed or angry, or looking for certain desperately looking for something in the external world, then the breath will also be simultaneously appear in a disturbed way. If you measure the breath, if you observe the breath, then you will see that breath is actually becoming very disturbed. Whereas if the person attains a very restful state, if the person is peaceful and happy and calm, then the breath also becomes slow and peaceful without a lot of disturbance. So this observation is exactly what triggers the practice of pranayama as a device, as a tool to attain the mind mastery, control over the mind also. So that is the idea. And satsangat, so the second device or the second sadhanam which is provided to us here is satsanga. So satsanga is relating oneself, associating oneself to the Satpurusha Sahavasa. So being in the presence of great Mahatma, being in the presence of Jnanis, being in the presence of Acharya, being in the presence of the Guru, all these things are very helpful to us, because in their presence several realities about life are naturally, we become available to absorb several reality or facts about life without having a lot of struggle, just because their presence itself calms the mind, and that peace of mind which is generated in our mind makes us available for higher ideals, thinking about higher ideals of life. So this satsanga has a great mahima, is extolled in the scriptures to no account, right, to no bounds. Satsanga is the be all and end all of sadhana, to be very honest, right? Any directions that we want in spiritual life, in our day-to-day life, in dharmic life, in spiritual life, if you want any direction, then approach the Satpurusha, because they don't have any axe to grind, you see. So therefore they will provide the correct directions to our life, since they are free from selfishness, since they don't have any desires. So therefore their mind is available for correct thinking about things very naturally and correctly, and providing us the correct directions. So simply being in their presence and listening to them and observing them and getting their margadarshana is very essential in order to gain the peace of mind, which will which is exactly the thing which will help us to gain vairagyam. So satsanga is the next thing which is provided to us here. Then vasana tyagat. So Vasana refers to the impressions in the mind which trigger us to act in certain ways in order to satisfy desires. So for instance, one may have a certain desire, deep desire to eat sweets. So even from birth, this child used to like sweets, it seems. So we tell about some children in that way. So certain children are more prone to certain kinds of attitudes, and because of some Purva Janma Vasana. So from Purva Janma impressions, some impressions from the previous Janmas. Because of that, they are attuned to have some kind of difficulties or some kind of likes and aversions. So the attachments and aversions are these vasanas. One has to be free from them if one has to give up the desires from the mind. One has to attain peace in the mind. So giving up the vasanas is essential. So how does one give up the vasanas? Simply don't, the vasanas are there, but don't continue acting in their benefit. So when there is a desire, this is applying for all desires. All people have desires. Most people have desires, right? When the desire crops up in the mind, which is very natural, it is natural for the mind to have desires, let's say. So when the desire occurs in the mind, then we don't just act according to the desire immediately. What we do is to think, reflect upon the utility of that desire, reflect upon the reasoning behind that, reflect upon whether satisfying this desire is good or bad, whether it is dharma or adharma, whether it is suitable for my sadhana or against my sadhana, whether it is in the path of vairagyam or whether it is in the path of the samsara. Is it taking me towards jnanam or is it taking me towards samsara, this desire? If it is taking me towards jnanam, I can go ahead along. If it is taking me towards the samsara, if it is taking me towards worldly attachments, then I have to give it up for sure. So vasana tyaga. So give up all the vasanas which pull us towards the worldly things. Very essential. So that is the third sadhana. Then the fourth sadhana is mentioned, Hari Charana Bhakti Yoga. Have bhakti, have devotion towards Bhagavan, have devotion to the feet of Bhagavan. So Ishvara's grace is very essential to us in this path. Without Ishvara's grace, we cannot progress in the spiritual path. Guru's grace and Ishvara's grace both are required to progress along the spiritual path. So by the practice of Haricharana Bhakti, by the practice of devotion to the Lord's feet, the desires in the mind will naturally be given up. The desires in the mind will naturally come down. So this there is no possibility of there is a modern day disease or a modern day misunderstanding related to the spiritual life, that I am not religious but I can be spiritual. This particular phrase here, Hari Charana Bhakti Yogat, is reflecting or is informing us that there is no possibility of being spiritual without being religious. One has to be having devotion to Bhagavan, one has to be having devotion to Ishvara, one has to do dharma, one has to follow the Shastra. All these come under the Haricharana Bhakti. Following of Shastra also comes under the word Haricharana Bhakti. So one has to do all that in order to attain the Ishvara's grace. By Ishvara's grace, one can attain the peace of mind which is necessary for further practice. Further, also one more idea here is, you see, the person who does not have Haricharana Bhakti, who does not have love for Ishvara, who does not have devotion to Ishvara, will naturally become devoted to the worldly things. The mind is a very emotional entity. It desires for happiness and satisfaction. If you do not provide it happiness and satisfaction by devotion, by these satsanga, by pranaspanda nirodha, by vasana tyaga, then it will naturally go for worldly things. So if these things are not practiced, then the worldly things will enter the mind. So if you want to keep the worldly things away from the mind, increase the impact or increase the dominion of Ishvara in your mind. Increase the space for Ishvara in your mind. Increase the thoughts about Ishvara in your mind. Read the literature, read Bhagavatam, read the Srimad Bhagavatam, read the Puranas, read the great devotional literature, read the Shastra, read anything and everything which talk about the glory of Ishvara. So many, Bhagavad Padad himself has written so many beautiful stotras. One can take them up and meditate on any one of them for several hours altogether. There is so much, what do you say, the spiritual juice in every one of such, stotras written by Bhagavad Padad, that they can be absorbed by a carefully studying mind and provide succor, provide comfort, provide happiness and even pleasure for lot of time. Repeated meditation on such sutras are also possible. And this is just the beginning point. Apart from that, the Itihasa Purana literature is also there. Unfortunately, today we have become very bad and poor at studying our own scriptural, spiritual literature. Our Shastras are worshipped, but they are not studied. Haricharana Bhakti Yogat, to me, also implies the study of spiritual literature. Srimad Bhagavata Purana is a great Puranam which one can study, and as it is well known, it is nothing but Bhagavan Sri Krishna in the form of a textual treatise, in the form of a scriptural treatise. So, in particular, I enjoy studying this particular text simply because it gives the mind so much happiness simply to listen to Srimad Bhagavatam, even to listen and study a little bit of Srimad Bhagavatam. One can also, of course, look at all other Puranas and other literature as well in order to gain the grace of Ishvara via the practice of Haricharana Bhakti. So by doing all this, the thirst which is there in the mind for sensory objects certainly reduces slowly and goes down to absolute minimum. So Vegam Jahati Shanaihi. So 4 sadhanas are mentioned here. Before this also, few other sadhanas have been mentioned. So with this, the chapter is complete. Now we will do a short summary of this chapter so that we can keep the ideas, keep the teachings in this chapter in our memory. To me, it is a very important chapter which gives us very specific directions. It is not only telling us what is true, but also telling us exactly what you have to do in order to gain the manonigraham, in order to gain the peace of mind which is necessary. So, what is the summary? We saw the verses which told Vichara about the nature of the mind enables one to attain the Atma Jnanam. When the mind is able to think about its own nature, think about where it arose from, think about its own reality or unreality, think about the nature of the self, etc., then it becomes a prepared mind, it becomes a available mind for Atma Jnanam, which is the road to moksha, which is going to be the cause for moksha. So vichara, inquiry into the nature of the mind itself. Inquiry and is done about various things in the world, but here we are talking about inquiry about the nature of the mind and Atman itself. So for doing this kind of inquiry about oneself, this kind of vichara, for doing that, the mind has to be available to us. It should not be a mind which is always going out and interested to enjoy sense objects. So it should be available to us within our control. Shanti and Shama and Dama should be there. Shanti should be there. The sense organ should not be just left along their own way. The mind has to be the master of the sense organs, and it should be indrawn and undisturbed. Such a mind only can do vichara. So for gaining an undisturbed and indrawn mind which can do vichara, what is required? Giving up of desires is required. So desires, you see, there is the word giving up simply suggests that this may not be a very deliberate activity, as as the word give up says. It's not like there is a cup in the hand and you just drop it. That is a giving up. You give up the cup in your hand, you just drop it. So that kind of dropping is possible, but it is not intentional, but via inquiry and understanding, right? So via understanding, one gives up the desires. So the various in this chapter, the various ideas which were presented, how to give up the desires, right? How to give up the desires. 7 ideas to my understanding were presented, which I am summarizing. The first is, observe that pleasure and pain always come of their own without your struggle. You see, the desire is nothing but, it's starting a struggle for gaining happiness. Desire for a sense object is there because one feels that by gaining that sense object, by gaining that achievement, I will become happy. The idea here which was presented in one of the verses, we saw that the pleasure and pain, the happiness and sorrow, they come of their own due to the past karma. We don't have to struggle for them in any janma. We have already done all the things. Now we only have to reap the fruits by getting the various experiences in accordance with whatever we have done. So karma creates karma phalam. Karma phalam is sorrow and happiness. So therefore there is no need for any extra desire in the mind. Without desire, you can live your life. Be confident about that. Second, do not provide the sense objects for the enjoyment. When the desire may arise, but then don't go ahead and keep fulfilling them all the time. Just to say, you need not be fulfilled. Then you will observe that after the desire arises, once the mind understands that you are not going to fulfill that, it will go away of its own accord. Or we change the operation of the mind into some other positive activity, some sadhana, then the desire will go away of its own accord. So any desire is never going to be permanently a cause for our unhappiness. The desire may be there, may be present. If you don't provide it with its satisfaction, if you don't continue working for its satisfaction, then if you direct the mind to some other activity, some other sadhana, then the desire will vanish and the peace of mind is observed. Instead, if we keep on satisfying desires, the mind is never going to be satisfied. More desires, more bigger desires are going to come, and this is observed by everybody. The moment one starts enjoying some particular thing, then that enjoyment may stay for some time. Then the next bigger enjoyment, what next, is the question always. So to avoid this, make sure that you are not satisfying desires all the time. Then the third thing, by observing that the sense objects are not needed for happiness, as illustrated by the deep sleep Sushupti. So one of the verses illustrated that in Sushupti Avastha, in the deep sleep state, in the state where we are having this, the mind is not aware of the external world, nor it is projecting any dream. That state, the deep sleep state, in that state, there is no attachment of the mind to any sense objects. There is no this indriya, the Vishaya Grahanam is not happening. There is no grabbing of the sense objects. There is no connection between the sense organs and the sense objects. But even without that, there is just peace in the mind. There is a calm in the mind. There is a restful sleep is there. So the person wakes up and says, I slept happily without having any disturbance. How did he sleep happily without having any disturbance when the sense objects were not there? So this logic tells us that sense objects are not always needed for happiness and peace of mind. Without sense objects, it is absolutely possible to gain happiness and peace of mind. So therefore, when the sense objects are not needed, why do you go behind them? That is the logic here. By observing this, the desires can be slowly given up. Then the last 4 we have seen in the last verse. the prana spandana nirodha, practice of the breath, mastery over the breath, satsanga, then vasana tyaga, refusal to submit oneself to the attachment and aversions coming from the previous birth, and then bhakti, Ishvara, Haricharana, bhakti yoga, bhakti towards Ishvara and his feet. Through all these techniques, to all these sadhana, one can free the mind from the grasp of the desire, from the grip of the desires, and therefore make the mind available and in a restful state, available for further jnana marga. So with this, we will conclude today's session, and the Mano Nigraha Prakaranam is concluded. In the next meeting, we will start with the Vairagya Prakaranam. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.